Welcome to Taste of Truth Tuesdays, where we'll be serving up bite-sized conversations on all things fitness, nutrition, mindset, and spirituality. So grab your headphones and get ready to taste the truth with us every Tuesday. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform because every bite counts. Hey, welcome back to Taste of Truth Tuesdays. I'm so excited about today's episode. We're deconstructing deception, talking about multi-level marketing companies, exploitation, and online influencers. To unpack these concepts, I brought on Jill, who is the host of one of my favorite podcasts, Opportunity Cost, which is about multi-level marketing companies. In each episode, she covers inner workings, origins, nuances, and tries to answer the question, is this the opportunity of a lifetime or the illusion of one? We're going to be wading through the murky waters of the high control elements of multi-level marketing companies, conspiracies, and the emotional manipulation and exploitation that happens in these environments. We're going to talk about Enagic's King and Water scandal, Mary Kay's feminist facade, faith and finance, influencers and ideologies. And then at the end, Jill shares some of her own podcasting insights about her journey creating Opportunity Cost, which I found really fun. So join us for an eye-opening episode that tackles the intersections of gender, culture, business, and control. You really don't want to miss out on these compelling insights. So let's kick it off. All right, everybody, we are here with Jill, and you're probably aware of how insanely excited I am for this conversation. So, Jill, will you please just introduce yourself to the audience and share with the listeners what inspired you to delve into these topics you cover and how your personal journey has influenced your work in combating MLMs?
Yeah, hi, my name is Jill, and I have a podcast where I talk about multi-level marketing companies, scams, things of that variety. The reason that I got really, really fascinated by MLMs is that they're kind of the perfect intersection of all the things that I'm interested in. I'm really interested in gender and culture, power dynamics, business. I've been in business for a really long time, traditional corporate business and high control groups, because MLMs can have high control tendencies as a part of them. So if you're into cults, you might be interested in learning about MLMs. I also have personal experience. So my best friend from college got involved in Arbonne when we were pretty young. And I had come to her and said, hey, these things can be really dangerous. I just want you to be careful. And she started spitting out all of this objection handling from the company that I had never heard before. I had never heard her speak like that. It was like looking at a different person. I was just mind blown how immersed she was, and she hadn't really been in the company for that long. And so I was like, what's going on here that I don't even recognize her anymore? And so that really kickstarted my fascination with them. And ever since, I've kind of dug into the history. They've been around for a really long time. I'm really invested in all of the inner workings and all of the deception that I think is happening in MLMs.
Yes. And considering the connections with the government, it definitely does intersect a lot with Christian nationalism and even some of the concerns we see with the teen industry and some of those corrupt programs that are abusive to children and teens. It seems like it's similar kind of dirty money, and the government's really creepy. And you talked about how these regulations are lobbied and protected on episode 1, right? With Amway.
Yeah. So if you kind of track the beginning of MLMs with Amway in the 1950s, 60s, they really started lobbying very, very early on. And so the direct selling, or, the multi-level marketing lobby, the direct selling association, I believe is the term that they fall under. They have all multi-level marketing companies underneath them, and they pay a certain fee into that association, which is essentially a lobbying group. And they meet on Capitol Hill all the time. They met with President Biden, I think, earlier this year because of the non-compete law or something to do with that. So they've had decades of lobbying power at the highest levels of government that the anti-MLM community is just starting to catch up with. We're just starting to make some traction with the FTC in partnership with them. Not me personally, but other people in the community have gotten involved in more of the kind of conversations about regulation.
Very, very eye-opening, especially because it's not the regulation right now doesn't really protect the consumer like a lot of folks think. So that's why that's very pertinent to some of the stuff we're talking about, which are vulnerabilities. And so we're here just to arm others so they can keep an eye out, because I fell to an MLM for 5 years. It became part of my identity. And it was, I don't know if there's much high control groups particular. I mean, it's bad news bears all and through. It definitely preyed on my vulnerabilities. And so I appreciate you sharing all the information you do. And so I have personal experience with almost every company you talk about, whether not that I enrolled in them, but I was close, or they tried, or I have close friends that are in them too. I cannot stress enough. So several of your episodes, because I came from the new age world, they're all about water frequency. They're all about spiraling it and getting it chied back up. I know that's structured water, dude. Drink your coconut water and your raw milk. It's structured. I know all about that. Yes. So several of your episodes talk about this. And I don't know if I say it right. The enagic Kangen water.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a made up word. So it's okay if you don't say it right. And
Yeah.
so in one of your reels, I love your content on Instagram too. And are you on TikTok as well? Yeah, I'm not on that beast, but I am proud of you for being on there and spreading the word. So one of your reels discussed the promises that are made to bridge the wealth gap. And I found that really insightful and pertinent to know. And so could you share your insights on how MLMs like an Enagic financially exploit individuals financially? And that happened to me. I was so broke and in so much debt, and they convinced me that this was my ticket to like own property and buy a house. It was through and through. I was this person and they exploited me. And what are the dangers posed by this misinformation that they spread? And, I remember taking photos of myself on a mountain. I quit like a stable job and was like, I'm on a mountain living the dream. Here I am working for free.
Yeah. So I think when we talk about MLMs, we're really talking about gaps in the social safety net. That means most of the time, like 80% of people that are in MLMs are women. And I think that's no coincidence, considering that women have the most, I think, one of the most like difficult kind of financial journeys, just depending on like if they're a single mom, if they're military wife, like I believe that you are, and you know, moms that have just had kids that can't go back to work yet. But the economy that we live in is very difficult. It's not easy, like I think both of us are in the same generation. It's almost impossible to own property at this point just because the housing is so astronomically higher than wages. And there's all kinds of things. People, they prey on people with disabilities, they prey on people of color, they prey on the low income families. There's just a lot of demographics that MLMs will come in and say, hey, you can have everything that you want. You don't have to be this kind of statistic that is struggling and constantly worrying about paying bills. But the problem with that is that statistically, you have a 99% chance of either not making any money or losing money in MLMs. And so they're really, really good about selling a lifestyle. They say, hey, if you go to the beach with your family or on a work trip, don't post about how you got there. You just say, hey, my MLM got me this opportunity. So there's a lot of kind of obfuscation on social media from these reps that are kind of setting up this lifestyle, this perfect lifestyle of like, I have my car that the MLM bought me, which is not true. Or like, I got to go on this trip that the MLM bought me, which is not true. So there's all kinds of kind of smoke and mirrors that happens in MLMs, and people who are just looking for an extra $200. They're looking to just put food on the table for their family, or, supplement their income like in some way or another. And they're really, really vulnerable to those messages that the MLM reps put out.
Yes. And Amway particular, it seems that they like to use the American dream verbiage a lot, which also, has its problems. We could go off in many tangents there, but nonetheless, the positive thinking and the like Tony Robbins, that sort of mind, it's like apologetics in the religion world. It's like thought stopping techniques There's so much psychological and emotional manipulation with the music, with the mind over matter. You were like, if you're not making money, it's because you're thinking negatively. I cannot tell you how much my team told me that. But if I have, or even just law of attraction in general, which is huge in MLMs, right? And that still, I feel like, plays on the same sort of thing. Fascinating how all those intersect. It really is. No wonder you nerd out on this. I wanted to touch base on a comment you made that you have more chances at winning profit in the lottery compared to an MLM opportunity. And that is broadly accurate considering overall statistical likelihood of profitability. So that in itself is a mic drop Instagram post.
Yeah, there was like a whole study that the Consumer Awareness Institute did. And there are so many statistics. And the guy that did it had researched and interviewed like hundreds of people that were in MLMs, had researched MLM compensation plans. It is a very, very thorough report. But I wanted to touch on, you mentioned Enagic, and I wanted to make sure that we got to this because I think what I find so fascinating about Enagic or companies that have more of like a new age spirituality kind of bent is that they really, really capitalize on that law of attraction. Like those things are very popular ideas within the new age community. And because Enagic, and there are several companies like this, their products are so high priced. And I think most MLM products are super high priced compared to what's available in the market. And to sell something that is like $2,000, $5,000, I've even heard of people spending $17,000 getting started in Enagic, which I think is unique to them, that they justify that by convincing their recruits that this is some miracle product, that this is like, and that's paired with like distrust of the water supply, distrust of the government, kind of like fear mongering and like conspiracy theories that come along with those things. And that's not unique to Enagic. I think that's pretty common in like any kind of like wellness MLM. They're like, this is going to heal you like mind, body, soul thing, which is an insane claim to make, but that's how they justify it. And people will kind of, who already have those kind of fears or they have that distrust, they really capitalize on that insecurity. And then before you know it, you're shelling out your credit card or a loan on something like that.
And there's reasons why we might have concerns. And so it's like, that's why I'm like, there's a reason why that fear mongering works, because there's some truth.
Yeah.
Your fears. Yet, what standards are they doing? Like, I cannot tell you what isogenics and how much they play on, like, there's no minerals in the soil. And I know that, like, I have my degree in dietetics. I know how important, and as an athlete, I know how important minerals are. And I get that. So they have science and they have research and they have all this stuff that of course they funded, but I mean, of course they funded it. Who else would pay for it? Like, I had all these rebuttals. People were just like, you can always just get your products paid for. That was just always the line, is just like, tell two people. And it was just very, very much like, what other protein powder can pay you back? And so I ended up enrolling all 4 of my gym locations. I like got really deep into this, and the whole thing is wild. I'm not sure if I'll do a whole episode on it or just do a front and end cap on it. I don't know how much I want to share to like bring other people into it either, as I'm sure you understand. So anyways, I just know that there's so many levels of praying. Like, my upline bought me my flight to an event. There's so much pressure to get to the events if you're going to have success. I could barely afford the products, but now I have to get to Vegas to get to the event if I want to be successful. And so they bought me the flight. So now I have to go. And I'm like, well, I can't afford all the other things there. And like, I have so much anxiety, and I didn't have any friends and I didn't know anybody. And now guess where I am? In Vegas, which is a very, very dangerous place to be, by yourself without anyone you can trust. Wow. When I really think about all the vulnerabilities on so many levels and layers, like, we need to just talk more about it. So I really appreciate that these conversations are happening. And so we'll shift a little bit, because you and I both have deconstructed from evangelicalism. And that in itself, deconstruction, is a beautiful, very diverse experience. And I love learning and growing with everybody. And it's wonderful and wild. I love that we can talk about some of these gender disparities here. And that's where we see that from the beginning of this conversation. So your content sheds light on this phenomenon of Christian women, particularly getting drawn into MLMs. So in isogenics, that was through and through the thing. And I just I would always just use Jesus verbiage. My husband would be like, talking to? He would like he would literally see that I was chameleon and could change how I was phrasing. And I would literally be using faith in the conversations that I didn't even have. And so I understand that it's so much a part of the MLM culture. That's wild. So I love that we're going to talk about that. What do you think are the underlying factors between the vulnerabilities that are within Christian communities that then make them susceptible to the MLM schemes? And then second, since I know we'll be here for a while and I'll just mute myself, how do you think we can address these issues?
Yeah, I think there are multiple things that contribute to this, and there's always nuance here when we're talking about somebody's faith. So I think the first thing is complementarianism. It isn't present in all churches. I don't want to make any blanket statements about anything, but complementarianism is pretty common in especially evangelicalism. It's very, very common to have this understanding of the husband has a certain role, the wife has a different role, and her role is to stay at home, take care of the children, sometimes homeschool them, educate them, be responsible for all of that stuff. And so that leaves them kind of out of the workforce. That leaves them out of some of the opportunities that, a more egalitarian relationship wouldn't have. And so there's vulnerability there. And MLMs like to capitalize on that. They say, oh, well, you can stay home with your babies and you can build this business part-time in the gaps of time between school pickup lines or whatever the messaging that they have. The second thing I think is common, and I found this in myself too, when I was still involved in the church, is you kind of have this inherent trust of another Christian, even if you don't know them. If I meet somebody and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus, there's this kind of, I don't know, like unspoken, like, oh, she's one of me, like she's one of us, and I can trust her. But you don't actually know that person. And MLM leaders, a lot of the times they're encouraged to use their faith to recruit. And they're like, make a connection with somebody. If you have something in common with somebody, talk about that. And either, knowingly or unknowingly, they're using that to manipulate people to join the company. In terms of how we can keep those things from happening, I think it's really just a general awareness about MLMs. I don't know. I think if it's a red flag, if any company, and a lot of companies do this, they say explicitly that they're faith-based or they have a division of the company that's faith-based. I think if any corporate job was promoting religion, who wasn't an outwardly Christian organization, and started bringing that into conversation, started talking about it at events. I've seen prayer and Bible studies at, upline trainings. Any of that is a red flag. Like any normal job would not ever do that because it's a big no-no for a reason. I've seen a lot of people kind of fall into that indoctrination and specifically kind of marry their understanding of their position in the MLM with their faith. And so when they leave the MLM, what I see a lot is that they're comes wrapped up in that identity. And so when they leave, their faith kind of like falls apart or it becomes ratcheted up into fundamentalism or some other things that are a little bit more scary that aren't the typical, just like I go to church and I believe and like kind of all the community aspects of that. So I think if I could give any advice to somebody that is a Christian that's, interested in MLM or is, talking to somebody who's trying to recruit them in MLM, is just keep your eyes open and trust your intuition. I think, in my opinion, the church can sometimes teach you not to trust your own intuition and to see everything as a sign that God wants you in this thing because somebody's showering you with attention or showering you with positive feedback and they're a Christian, so it must be coming from God. That's not necessarily true. So I think being able to recognize when something doesn't feel right and recognizing when somebody might be trying to take advantage of you, I think is, hopefully that will help guide you in some way.
Yeah, it's really well articulated because that denial of intuition is something that my husband and I really deeply struggled with. And I don't think I think that's a it's an unfortunate repercussion of the concept of original sin. I don't know if it's even meant to be a repercussion of the teachings. I think evangelicalism just really likes to twist it because of the benefit of that. And I'm really looking forward to having someone on talk, kind of push back a little bit more about some of these theological doctrines that can be so damaging. I really appreciated, just the ability to say like, hey, there's some red flags to spot. God gave us this. This is a God-given intuition, if we want to use their verbiage and try to affirm them. And, you also mentioned unknowingly. I was unknowingly matching their language because it's just part of the sales technique that you're taught. And I just wanted also to be accepted and to, not upset them. And so it definitely, I'm not really a malicious person. I just really loved them and I wanted them to, they were my teammates and I truly, they're my friends. I don't know. It's just really interesting. You're right. How it all comes together unknowingly, and how that can actually be really causing a faith crisis down the road. And that's another reason we'd really want to prevent this for anyone who has a faith, to keep that kind of separate. And so in more of your content, you highlighted how tradwife platforms like the Girl Defined, who I've mentioned before here on this podcast, because they do a lot of shame-based messaging, which I come from the diet culture and fitness industry, and I'm like really not a fan of shaming people into change. So I appreciate that you brought, to attention that they have this like appealing facade that masks these harmful ideologies. And so you've made a couple reels on them, so I don't expect you to be able to dive into all of it. And I'll link everything in the show notes for folks who want to see what I'm talking about. Can you delve into some of how these influencers, Bethany and Kristen, despite acknowledging recently the negative impacts of purity culture and the outdated views of sexuality? I think they were on the Paul Morgan kind of circuit, but yet they still continue to promote these harmful beliefs or profit off of them. Can you kind of want to touch base on some of that stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I think with Bethany and Kristen, I think I'm going to do a whole episode on my next season, I think, which I'm really excited about, kind of diving deeper into them. But it's funny because I see so many similarities with myself and my youth and with Bethany and Kristen, because we were really raised in very similar environments. And so I really think that Bethany and Kristen are just products of their environment. They've never kind of separated themselves from their kind of understanding of their family congregation. They live close to their families, and it is a sister duo. So it's not just one person that kind of has the ability to say like, hey, we're going to change up what we're doing or like transform a little bit. It's two people. So I'm really curious to know, how much their dynamic or might be disagreeing between the two of them about what they promote. Because most of the time I see Kristen really being the kind of hard driving about gender roles, about biblical womanhood, about kind of their anti-LGBTQ views. That's where I see that the most. I think it's my personal opinion that I think that they're trying to redraw a line that they think is righteous and is still within the confines of their understanding of biblical truth. I don't think that there's such thing as biblical truth. It's just interpretation, depending on the denomination, the church, the group that you're a part of. And so I think for them, and I can relate to this because I felt the same way, that I was like, well, I can do things differently. I can use my platform and my relationships and kind of be a different version of Christianity. It's still Christian, it's still truth, but it's a different thing. And I think what's hard about that is that they're kind of selling a new version of purity culture. They're not calling it that. It's, biblical womanhood. It's like kind of this new version of it, but it's still capitalizing on the same, like you said, shame-based messaging and techniques that they had used previously. It's just wrapped up in a different package. And so in order to fully deconstruct purity culture, I believe you have to deconstruct the patriarchal system in which Christianity promotes and thrives on. And until you can kind of see the end of the tunnel of that thing and really see it for what it is, can you change? And I don't think that they're willing, because of the platform and because of the engagement that they have and that they've built over years, are willing to change that enough. And they're just kind of spinning it around and like repackaging it into something that's digestible. And I also think for their audience, who are mostly young women who are involved in the church, these are people, these are girls who haven't had the chance to go to college somewhere else and like develop their own ideas to really understand their faith from a different perspective outside of their families. And that can be, I think, really dangerous because you're not kind of exposing yourself to different viewpoints. I think it's really important for young women to develop, any young person really, to develop a understanding of things that are different from them. That's really what made me grow as a young person is, oh, like I'm experiencing and meeting people that have an entirely different experience than I do. They have an entirely different perspective on life and religion and faith than I ever could because I was born into purity culture in the 90s, you know? So I just find them really fascinating and I'm interested to see how they kind of transform or change, if at all, and what happens with them.
I really appreciate how well articulated you are. That's why I'm just like meeting myself because I think I'm still in a lot of the anger phase of my deconstruction, which I'm trying to get permission for. And I can relate. I cannot imagine building a brand like that and going big and like being known as an influencer and getting paid and having your financial, like so much of your life is tied into this identity that if you change your mind on any of it, like I can't. So like for me, I built Chase of Truth on thinking that biblical literacy was at an all-time low. And I took it on as my personal mission as a brand new Christian to tell everyone how to do things right. Now, while I was doing research and I wasn't really speaking from a place of authority, I thought because I was citing my sources and really I didn't know a lot. I was learning a lot while I was making my post, if you know what I mean. But, you know, I still see things a lot differently now, but I spent 37 years outside the church. So I'm so grateful for that now that I'm back outside the church. And I'm just so grateful that I didn't grow up on purity culture. I'm so grateful. I still have a lot of stuff to work through that what that 3 years did to me while I was in there. I'm just like, I grieve for folks who grew up in it. I cry a lot. And I just like, my heart is so heavy and I'm just so grateful for anyone who has the courage to speak on it. And so for me, you know, when I spoke out on it, I was right around 2,000 followers. My husband made a joke. He's like, you're so funny, dude. Here you are, wiki, mixing it up. And I like lost 400 followers really fast. I'm still losing followers every day on both of my pages, no matter what I do. And so it's really awesome. I'm just like, okay, cool. Well, I'm finding my voice. I'm speaking on things that matter to me. I'm putting things through ChatGPT so it helps me make it less inflammatory as possible because I want to not be contributing to the problem, even though I might want to talk shit about something that might be inflammatory. I am trying to not add to the noise. And I'm really proud of myself for having courage to do that, even if I'm not getting those dopamine rewards that you talk a lot about in one of your episodes. Your girl is not getting that. So and that's fine. I'm proud of myself for that. I'm so proud of myself. I'm like, girl, like you get no engagement in your content. You lose followers every day. And who still shows up? Me. You know, and so I just know that you can probably relate. Like your content isn't fuzzy wuzzy, you know, it's like it's rattling the tree. And I find so much courage in how you articulate yourself. And so I didn't have the shackles that they have, is what I'm trying to say. Girl Defined, Redefined has so many shackles on them. I was free to change my mind. I was free. You were just mentioning I'm a military wife. We have almost 8 times the unemployment rate. I really put myself at a massive disadvantage here as a personal trainer. I've given up my entire career and I cried to my husband about it. I wish someone sat me down and really said, yeah, it sounds good what you're about to step into, my friend, but you're giving up everything you just worked your entire adult life for. FYI.
Yeah. So that I would say, one, it's okay to be angry.
Thank you.
A normal emotion to have. And I've been there. I'm still there sometimes. Like sometimes I'll read stuff and I just like want to throw my phone at the wall. I'm just like, I cannot with this right now.
We just need to be constructive, right? We need to be constructive.
Yeah. And like people, I think this is so true. Like your experience, Girl Defined, people in MLMs, people that build their identity around a certain idea, like are always going to have that risk when they leave and try to live more authentically to who they are and change that they're like, oh my God, like I just built this entire existence around this thing and now I'm leaving. And there is that kind of a breakdown of identity before you can really build yourself back up into, okay, this is who I really am. This is what I'm really interested in. This is how I understand myself. And that's a part of life, right? Like our lives, hopefully, are very long and life's too short to be in a position that you're not comfortable. Life's too short to be in a high control group, whether that's your Christian fundamentalist church or in an MLM, like life's too short to do stuff that makes you unhappy.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us who are getting out of high control groups, getting out of an MLM, getting out of just in some sort of deconstruction, which I think a lot of us are, whether that's looking at colonialism, like my husband's Native American. So when we converted to Christianity, it was so hard on him. And I don't know how much you know about his activism in the Native community, but it's, yeah, I want to cry because we were suppressing so much to try to like go along with the gospel's good. It's really sick. And we need to do a whole episode on that. Living here in Virginia and how much I've been it's sick, but I don't want to feel like super guilty and all I do is cry. I also, does that make sense? Like this is balance of like owning the past and what we've done and then not also being so paralyzed with guilt and your sadness. Cause I'm pretty like sensitive Sally over here. And I want to make sure that I am doing, not beating myself up for stuff that I didn't really do and just doing the best I can with my privilege and my voice. And I think we do that. And so there's so many things that I wanted to just say thank you for. And this conversation went lots of directions that we could keep going. But I do want to close the conversation on, I loved your little post about your journey of creating your podcast. I didn't even think about putting anything out there publicly. And so you did. And I related a lot to that. I mean, I mentioned before we push record, if y'all listen to, her podcast, her editing skills are through the roof. And I'm so impressed with that. But you talked about dealing with the sound of your own voice, trusting your own instincts during editing. And there were so many times during season 1 where I didn't even want to drop the episode, Jill. I did not even want to post it. But my mom didn't raise a quitter. So I followed through with my own made up shit and did it. And then I ended up deleting all of it. Like, okay. And I guess that was me not trusting my intuition. And then lastly, finding joy just in the creative process, because if I only have 10 listeners, so it doesn't really matter on that end. It does and it doesn't. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, the process of creation, all of the stuff we talked about, and then compared to the promoting of it and the pressure to do that, and anything you're willing to expand on that for us, for me probably, would be really helpful.
Yeah. I think, so I've done art, I did visual art when I was in high school, and I was a video editor for part of my career. So that's part of why I have some editing skills that I learned along the way, which I'm really grateful for. But I've seen, it was like an old meme or something from years and years and years ago of the creation process is this is great. This is okay. This is shit. I am shit. This is great. This is awesome when you're done with it. And I think that's really descriptive of the creative process. You kind of enjoy the creation part of it in the beginning, and then kind of that self-doubt comes in and you're like, oh my God, am I really going to put this on the internet kind of feeling? And then when you get to the end of it, you're like, okay, that was great. I'm really happy that I created something. And, there's joy in that. You spend a lot of time creating as a podcaster. The majority of your time is in scripts. And for me, in scripts and editing and recording and interviewing. And there's so much behind the scenes work that happens, and it getting posted is one moment, maybe a day where you post it on your Instagram story or something. In terms of promoting it, yeah, I don't know. It's mind boggling to me because on TikTok, I have 20,000 subscribers or followers or something random. And I was just like, what the heck is happening? Why do people want to listen to me? You kind of go through this what's happening. And it's also weird to put your face on the internet for random people to talk to you. And you develop relationships with some of your followers. It's really a kind of a weird thing that happens. So I think there's definitely pressure to be I need to post so that people can be routed to my podcast. But I think what I've learned is you also have to separate your personal life and your kind of identity from your kind of promotion of this thing. It's temporary. I'm not going to do this forever. I'm not going to be on the internet forever, hopefully. And so trying to find a balance between, okay, creating and, promoting this thing and doing social media and doing all those things. And then I have my real life, part of me is this is that person of me on the internet isn't necessarily me. It's the persona, it's a teeny tiny percentage of who I am and what I'm about. And you really have to get to know me to know the real me, which is like reserved for my friends and my family and, all that stuff. So I think it's been really fun to try to like find that balance. Now I'm in season 2 writing it, which I'm like, oh God, like I have to start this all over again. But I'm kind of trusting and, going into something like if I start writing, it's going to happen. Like it'll just flow out of me and trusting in like kind of my creative mind to just start spitting out stuff because that's all I can do. Some things are going to flow easy. Sometimes they're not. And that's just what it means to be an artist.
My husband and I are both artists, as you probably know. My husband does tattoos and drawing and writing and bonsai art, and I'm more of a dance, more of a circus performer. Yeah. And so we relate on a lot of that. And I hope one day we'll be real life friends too. And so I felt that too. It was so funny when I was deconstructing, I had several folks in my DMs not even knowing my testimony. They're like, what gospel did you believe? And I was like, what? You don't even know me. Like, you didn't even know what I believe now. So does that make sense? I was like, the parasocial dynamic is so fascinating because I don't have much of an outside life. And that's because of being the military spouse. We just moved. We just made one friend. That's very exciting. So I'm hoping that we'll get some more. And I was telling my husband this. I was like, I think Instagram and all of that, my podcast and all of that would mean so much less to me if I had more to fill my life in. Like when I lived in Portland, I had an insane amount of things going on because I'd been there 10 years. So it just takes a while to build stuff. So I have to give myself compassion. It's hard to make friends when I'm 39. So you're an older adult. We don't have kids. My husband and I we're weird, and that's in the good way. So it's just like, we're like, and like, okay, so we deconstructed from Christianity and I live in Virginia. Like, so I'm thinking maybe we need to start like a deconstruction meetup because censorship is lame. We have the friggin' 2024 is only going to get wilder. And I feel like we just need more real life friends to support each other as the election comes closer, regardless of where we're falling on that binary spectrum or whatever. It's just like supporting each other through these times. I think meetups would be really rad. So, because then there's more context and nuance and just more human connection there than that social media just absolutely cannot convey. And so I do appreciate that you touched base on all of that. I needed the friggin' pep talk, and I'm hoping some of the listeners could share from some of that wisdom too. I'm sure there's other content creators out there, and I think a lot of content creators struggle with this relationship with social media. I absolutely love creating, and I don't know why. It's just, I think you're right. We just wake up, we have things that need to be said. I love writing. Since having long COVID, my brain fog is like literally finally going away. So my writing's coming back, my ability to articulate words. I'm really inspired by your scripts and how you articulate your podcast. I'm like, gosh, my first episode of season 2 was very much inspired by you. So I don't know if you listened to it, but it's like, I hope she doesn't think I copied her, but I was like, yo, I'm going to try to make it as fun. And I'm not going to do that for any other episodes, just so y'all know. But like, I hope you're like, I tried to incorporate sound effects.
Yeah, I'll take a listen.
I did sound effects. And that was all because of you. I got on I asked ChatGPT, what are the best free sound effects? I like literally probably could have slid into your DMs, but I was like too embarrassed to ask. And I did when you think I was copying you, but I just thought there's a lot of podcasts that add the sound effects, little whoosh of the text message. Like you help tell the story. My husband is a storyteller. He's flown all over the world to tell Native American stories. I think he really does love your ability to storytell. Like you really do have a gift with this. So whatever, I just want to encourage you. I think you do. I feel like I'm probably one of your biggest fans and I appreciate it through and through. So is there anything else you'd like to share with us while we close down this conversation that I've had so much fun? I'm really glad that you were able to make it.
You're so sweet. That's so funny. I don't think that anybody is copying anybody. We all get inspiration from each other. Okay, so yeah. And any editing tips, sound effect tips that you want, I literally pull stuff off of YouTube all the time. Don't tell the YouTube gods that I did that, but I pull stuff all the time and splice it together and like figure out, I don't even know. I'm not an audio engineer. So like half the time, like, oh, like audio. I don't know, it doesn't sound like great, but thank you. You're very kind. And I'm very inspired by you. You're always like just going hard on like all the reform stuff, which I love watching. It's so funny. Especially being out of it. And I'm like, oh yeah, like she's like on top of what's happening in the community because I can't keep up with all that stuff all the time. I'm just like, I can't even deal with it. But I catch up with you. I don't have anything to add. Look forward to season 2. I'm deep in the middle of writing all of it. So look out for that. And I would be happy to have you in my social community.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I will definitely link all the episodes that I mentioned or the reels and stuff in this episode so you guys don't have to go scouring for that. And make sure you give her a follow. Thank you so much for listening. And that's all I have for you today, folks. Thanks again for listening. I really appreciate your time. I've got so many exciting episodes in the queue for you. So until then, maintain your curiosity, embrace skepticism, and keep tuning in. Have a great week.